forced to settle in the lower bogland. This new settlement eventually became known as the Bogside. Over the next 300 years, the Celtic population grew rapidly, but remained outside the walls of the city. Derry's Celtic population swelled during the Great Famine of the 1840s, and by the 1850s they were a clear majority in Derry. Towards the end of the 19th century, there were frequent outbursts of sectarian violence as Catholics sought better living conditions and fair political representation, and Protestants opposed them. Constituency boundaries were fixed to minimise the political power of Catholic nationalist voters. Ireland's nationalist movement, the struggle to break free from British power, gained in intensity in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. This eventually led to the partition of the country in 1921, when Britain held on to 6 counties in the north. Partition led Derry inside the boundaries of the British Union state, a nationalist city under Unionist control. Nationalists without political power were forced to endure decades of oppression and discrimination. The 1960s dawned with a new era of optimism in Europe, but not for nationalists in Derry. Derry had the second highest rate of unemployment in the north, and overcrowding in nationalist areas was unbearable. The Unionist government built the North's second university in heavily Unionist Coleraine instead of nationalist Derry. An investment was directed towards the new city of Craigavon instead of to where it was needed here. Rail links were closed down, and there was little or no investment in local roads. By the mid-1960s, nationalists were beginning to see how other oppressed minorities were organising themselves to fight back, and were particularly inspired by the civil rights movement in the USA. They set up groups to demand equality in votes, housing and employment. The University Campaign and the emergence of the Derry Unemployed Action Committee and the Derry Housing Action Committee marked the beginning of civil rights agitation in this city. The first major civil rights march for the city was set for the 5th of October 1968. This was banned by the Unionist government, but went ahead anyway. Only a few hundred people took part, and the marchers were attacked by the police before they had taken more than a few steps. A single television camera captured the violence used against the marchers, and when the footage was widely broadcast, it brought the situation here to the attention of the world. Nationalists in Derry were outraged by the violence of the 5th of October, and the small civil rights struggle quickly became a mass movement. Over the next 50 days, a series of marches and protests gained concessions from the Unionist government. Voting rights were achieved, and the gerrymandered Londonderry Corporation abolished. But some continued to march. In January 1969, a left-wing student group, People's Democracy, marched from Belfast to Derry and were attacked by loyalists and police along the way. The worst attack was at Burntollet, a few miles outside Derry. The violence suffered by the marchers at Burntollet led to fierce rioting. Police were repelled from the Bogside and Free Derry was born. "You are now entering Free Derry" was first painted on the gable wall. The situation got worse through 1969. Nationalists were outraged by Sammy Devaney's death after he was attacked by police in his home in the Bogside. The Apprentice Boys Parade in August led to the Battle of the Bogside. 3 days of rioting as local people repelled police attacks on their area. The battle only ended when the police were replaced by the British Army. The question of the border was coming to the fore in Irish politics, and the scene was set for more violence. In December 1969, the IRA split into the provisionals and officials, and both launched their campaigns. As violence intensified from all sides, the Unionist government introduced imprisonment without trial, or internment, against suspected Republicans. The arrests began in August 1971, and barricades were again built around Free Derry to keep the British Army and police out. Bloody Sunday happened here on Sunday, the 30th of January 1972. During a peaceful anti-internment protest, British soldiers opened fire on unarmed marchers, killing 14 and wounding 17 more. The British labelled the victims as gunmen and bombers, and launched a biased tribunal of inquiry to excuse their own actions. The relentless struggle by the Bloody Sunday Justice Campaign eventually forced the British to admit the truth in 2010, that all of the dead and wounded had been innocent, and that the shootings were unjustified and unjustifiable. Bloody Sunday happened in the streets outside this building. 2 of the victims died along what is now the front wall of this museum, with the others dying close by. The notion of free Derry stayed in our hearts and minds throughout the long years of conflict, and its spirit remains today. This is a story of a community, of their ability to rise against an oppressive force, to gain dignity and equality, as well as the truth and the beginnings of justice. It is a story of tragedy, but also one of inspiration and hope. Welcome to the Museum of Free Derry.